Hello and welcome to Powerdrift. We are still under lockdown. Our friends on the front lines are still fighting this battle on our behalf, and we are still trying to be part of the solution by staying at home. But our brains don't have to, and we're thinking about motorcycles. Welcome to another update in our series on riding gear, and today we are talking about the one part of your body that is 100% guaranteed to hit the ground if you have a crash, and how to protect those: your hands. Now, most people, when they're buying motorcycle gear for the first time, will automatically pull gloves into that setup, even if it is after the jacket. The fact of the matter is, your instincts will always make you put your hand out like this when you're about to fall, and therefore the chances that you will injure this are actually really high. People who have a lot of crashes in their history, people like, say, Marc Marquez in MotoGP, very quickly learn that this doesn't actually achieve anything. And this is a better position because it saves your hands from injury, because these are relatively small parts with lots of small bones, and causing damage to them is actually quite simple. One of the most infamous bones in the human body, in fact, in the context of motorcycling, is the scaphoid, which is right here. It's very easy to break, takes a hell of a lot of time to heal, it's very, very painful, and therefore you'll see that a lot of attention is being paid to the scaphoid in most gloves. But where do we start the process of purchase? Well, first, obviously, you have to consider the protection. Now, I have a pair of the Via Terra grid gloves here with me. The only reason why these are here is because these are the last gloves I wore before the lockdown. All of my other gloves are lying in Pune at the office, so I don't actually have a way of showing you those gloves. But first thing you want to consider is protection, and there is one exception to the protection rule, and that would be off-road gloves. A lot of off-road riders will use gloves that have very, very minimal protection indeed, and that's fine, because when they're going off-road, what they really want is the feel for the motorcycle and the terrain. They don't really want all of that much protection to get in the way. That's the crucial part. On the road though, those gloves are practically useless, and if you're thinking that you can make an off-road pair of gloves work on the road, you're probably asking your hands to be in trouble shortly. What you want is a lot of protection, and the lot of protection comes first from this knuckle guard, which is the most obvious thing that most of the gloves have. Now, the materials can be different. Some of them use plastics and they're very good. Some of them use carbon fiber, Kevlar, whatever. The material actually doesn't itself matter so much as the fact that this is a comprehensive unit, ideally on a floating chamber like this. As you'll usually see, I store earplugs in there. This is a fresh pair. The other glove will probably have a used pair which has a couple of uses left before I have to throw it away. But a floating bridge like this for the knuckle guard will actually make the glove a little bit easier to wear. Cheaper gloves may not have this expansion, but the more expensive gloves almost certainly will. The next thing to consider is what is the kind of protection on the top four fingers. I take them together because more or less the protection for these four is the same. So on this glove, for example, they've got a hard plastic protector on the first knuckle, and they've got a ventilated plastic protector on the second knuckle. This is a good configuration. Some of the cheaper gloves might have just foam armor. It's better than nothing, but you have to remember that something has been traded off. So for example, I like these gloves quite a bit, but I also love the RS Taichi WRX GP gloves. I think that's what they're called. Those gloves only have foam armor over the knuckles, but they have multiple layers of leather, and that's a trade-off that I am okay to make, but you have to think about this. It's not an automatic choice. Some of the gloves will also try and tie your little finger with the glove, just like this one. This is basically to protect your little finger. It's easy when you're having a crash for this finger to fold in, or worse, out. If it folds out, it's a small, not a very powerful finger, it will break. And the idea is that the glove ties it to your ring finger and tries to save it. There are other gloves that don't do this. This is slightly inconvenient because in terms of your mobility, it's a little bit challenging, especially off the bike. But a lot of gloves will basically tuck your finger in. So when you take the glove off, you'll realize that the leather actually folds your little finger inside. So it's constantly trying to push that glove completely inside. Okay, so that's the fingers, that's the top of your hand. The next thing is what's going on in the palm. Now the materials here will be thinner if the glove is designed for feel like a race glove, but that obviously also affects longevity. If you want a street glove, you are okay with a little bit thicker material which trades a little bit of feel, but it should give you good mileage. To give you an example of why this is important, I've only used one pair of race gloves in my entire career as my primary daily glove, a pair of Joe Rocket Speedmasters. I wore them out in 3 months. 3 months is actually 30% of what normally happens. A glove like this, I will make a hole in some of the fingers in usually about 9 months, assuming 3 months is what I ride in the wet, for which I use a completely different set of gloves. Yeah, so, and that's about 50,000 kilometers a year. So I'm not saying you're going to be out of a glove every year. I'm saying gloves wear out. The palm is where it usually wears out, so you need to figure out what's going on here. The things like touchscreen sensitivity and all that is a matter of personal choice. If it's important to you, go get it. If it's not, it's not. Most of the gloves that I find, once I've sweated enough into the fingertips, having ridden enough, they sort of work with screens reasonably well, so don't really worry about it too much. The second thing is what kind of coatings are they using. So for example, there's a textured coating here which gives you more grip on the bars. I've used gloves with it and without it. I don't think the difference is all that much. But the important thing is to see what's happening at the bottom of the palm where your scaphoid is. So this glove uses Knox branded armor. This particular glove is actually a prototype. It has a little bit of a manufacturing defect. The normal Viateras don't, but there should be some protection here. And some of the cheaper gloves will get away by putting additional layers of leather here, and you have to be okay with that choice if you're buying that glove. This is a budget thing. Next is the question of closure mechanism. How do you ensure that the glove stays on your hand in a crash? And usually you have 1 or 2 stage closure systems. The one that you'll always see is the cuff closure, which is this big one, which usually has a Velcro flap of some design with Velcro on the other side, and you basically close it together. This can be a big flap like this one or a thin one if it's a shorter glove. Whatever the mechanism is, ensure that it is safe. Race gloves sometimes will have a double layer, so there'll be one flap that goes from the left and another one that closes up from the top for a double protection on the cuff, so that when you're sliding, it's harder for the road to eat away at the glove. The secondary one that you want ideally is a wrist closure that is actually another Velcro tab altogether. Cheaper gloves, for example, that RS Taichi I was referring to, they can use an elastic to get away with it. Both mechanisms seem to be okay. If they are using a Velcro tab like this, what I would like to see is a small leather patch on top which hides this from the road, so that if you're sliding along the road like this, the road should not be able to open the wrist closure all that easily. But the big decision you'll make about the glove is what is the length of the gauntlet. That is the part from behind your wrist that covers part of your forearm. Now, I've heard that shorter gloves with really short cuffs, and this is an off-road style very commonly, is very nice to use in the city. Maybe, but the fact of the matter is your jacket ends here and your glove ends here as well. So there is a weak point here where your skin could be exposed quite easily. So honestly, I've ridden 20 years in all kinds of conditions. I've never used a short cuff glove, and I've never noticed that as a source of discomfort. So it's a decision that you have to make for yourself. So this is a full length cuff. You also get mid cuffs and short cuffs. What is the length changes how much protection you get, because the longer the cuff, the more the overlap between the end of the jackets. And the gloves cuff, which is from the glove extending downwards into the jacket, the more the overlap, the less the chances that your skin will be exposed. Okay, so that's the decision you have to make. Are gloves crucial? I would say yes, primarily because of your instinct. Your instinct says put your hand out and stabilize. Sometimes it's just for balance, but most of the time it is to protect other parts of your body from hitting down. And when you're falling off a motorcycle, even at 30-40 kmph, which is not really a fast crash, there is quite a bit of energy for your hands to absorb, and there will be damage. Hopefully not structural damage, but you will scrape off palms and stuff. And honestly, you don't want your hands damaged because you do a lot of work with it. So the question is, where do you start buying gloves? Now, in my experience, you can get reasonably good gloves for as little as 5,000 rupees in India from brands like Viatera or Rhinox, right? On the flip side, the budget that I actually use for my annual purchase, and it's annual only because I use them so much, my annual purchase is about 8,500 to 10,000 rupees for a pair of gloves, which will last me the entire year. If you want race gloves, they become quite a bit more expensive. So I think I got my race gloves on discount and they were still about 13,000 rupees, and race gloves can be quite expensive. But remember, race gloves are saying your comfort is not that crucial because you'll be using that glove for a very short duration. The protection is maximum importance, and the feel from the glove is very important. So how long the glove lasts is also not important to you. That's the design of a race glove. That's not what you want to use every day. A street glove should balance out the needs for protection, for comfort, for budget and longevity together in a balance that you like. I would always say think about the brands that you're buying rather than the budgets. Try and decide whether you're buying a good glove or not. If you don't trust the brand, it doesn't matter how good the price is. It has to protect your hand, and you only get 2 for the rest of your life. The final question is, what do you do in the rains? Well, we have had leather gloves get wet. All of us have done it. The dye leaks and your hand turns blue for a couple of days. And honestly, it doesn't really cause much damage. And once you learn how to protect your glove in terms of bringing it back to its normal life, it needs a little bit of polish. And I use cheap furniture leather polish rather than any expensive motorcycle leather grade polish, and it seems to work just fine. You will learn that you can restore leather gloves even after they've been thoroughly soaked. But the ideal solution obviously is to buy a waterproof glove. Waterproof gloves are an additional expense. They are a convenience. Most of them are quite warm, so if you're heading out to lay or something and you're expecting precipitation, it's a good glove to have. But they're also super inconvenient to own because most of them leave the membranes, the waterproof membranes inside the glove loose. And so when you pull your hand out of the glove, it pulls the membrane out and you have to stuff it back in. It's a struggle to get back into. It's just a mess. The one solution that I have used is buy one size larger when I buy waterproof gloves. So this is a Viatera pair of mediums. I do have a pair of Alpenstars Valparais. I think, yeah, they're called Valparaisos. The Valparaisos I bought large. They're larger, so it's easier for me to get my hand in and out. Obviously, if your hand gets wet in the process, then it's a whole different mess. But what I discovered in the process of doing this research is that there is a new material called Gore Grip. It's Gore-Tex, but it's taped down to the outside of the glove, and what that allows them to do is run very thin but effective insulation. It allows them to stick the membrane to the glove, so when you pull your hand out, the entire glove doesn't come out. The glove I have been using is a BMW Motorrad glove called the GS Dry, which I found on discount at some shop. I think it was in Canada. But the point is, Alpenstars, Dainese, all the big brands have started to use Gore Grip, and if you think that the Delta is something you can afford, I promise you, if you're buying a waterproof glove, try and get one with Gore Grip. Your life is just so much simpler. You get so much feel for the motorcycle. I have actually used it in the dry. In fact, if you see the series that we're currently running, the bucket list, we went from Puducherry to Mahe, and on that ride there was some chance of rain. Very little actually happened, but I was actually wearing a Gore Grip pair of gloves through the entire duration, and I was not uncomfortable. My hands didn't sweat. It was not really stinky at the end or any of those things. So the Gore Grip, I think, does make a significant difference to how comfortable a waterproof glove is. And to me, if you're riding the full spectrum, you need 4 pairs of gloves on your side. You need a pair of off-road gloves, maximum feel. The protection can be traded off quite a bit. A street glove, as much protection as your budget will allow, but it needs to last a long time. A race glove, as much protection and feel as you can get. How long it lasts doesn't really matter. And a pair of waterproof warm gloves for everything else. But to start with, I think a 5,000 rupee budget will buy you a reasonably good glove you can use every day. About 8,000 bucks, your choice is really huge. There's a lot of great gloves between 8 and 10,000 rupees. And of course, if you're looking for a race glove, look at about 13 to 15, 18,000 rupees as your budget. And remember, at the racetrack, the crashes happen at higher speeds, and therefore the amount of protection you want is more. This is a series of riding gear on Power Drift. We're talking about how to buy essential protective items that you will use on your motorcycle tomorrow, how to make the right decisions, spend your money as well as possible rather than as little as possible, and get maximum protection. Thank you so much for watching. This is Power Drift at Home. We'll be back with more ideas about riding gear soon.